This incident occurred so long ago that many details have become blurry in my memory. However, I will do my best to recount the events as vividly as possible. It was the last day of school, marking the end of my 4th grade year. In our elementary school, only 5th graders were allowed to walk home alone, while younger students had to be picked up by their parents. On that day, my mom was supposed to be the one to pick me up, but I had made plans for a play date with my friend Dennis to celebrate the end of the school year. Dennis and I had been friends since kindergarten, although he wasn't in my class that year. As the school day came to a close, we lined up in single file and made our way towards the exit door. Outside, we waited by our teacher, Miss Blue, for our parents to arrive. Among the crowd of parents shuffling in and out of the parking lot, I heard my name being called. "Tommy! Tommy!" I turned my head and saw a man waving at me. He introduced himself as Dennis's uncle and informed me that he was there to pick me up instead. I approached Miss Blue and informed her about the change, pointing towards Dennis's uncle, who was eagerly waiting. After confirming with him, Miss Blue dismissed me, and I hesitantly went with the man. As we maneuvered through the bustling crowd, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The man spoke rapidly and had a slight stutter, making it difficult to keep up with his pace. We reached his car, a dark red hatchback, and it struck me that Dennis wasn't with us. I mustered the courage to ask about Dennis's whereabouts, and the man turned to me with a disarming smile. He explained that Dennis was already at his house, but confusion and concern started to settle in. The drive to his house seemed longer than expected, considering that my own house was just a short walk away. Upon arrival, I noticed that his house appeared normal from the outside. However, as we entered, I realized that all the curtains were drawn, casting the interior into a dimly lit atmosphere reminiscent of nighttime. The only source of light came from a dim lamp in the corner of the room. I mustered the courage to ask about Dennis again, and the man's demeanor became increasingly jittery and nervous. He replied, assuring me that Dennis was downstairs playing video games. Deep down, I knew something was amiss, and a sense of danger gripped me tightly. Desperately searching for an escape, I attempted to open the door, only to find it locked with a key. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. However, a glimmer of hope remained that Dennis would soon appear. In an attempt to seek help, I found a telephone hanging on the wall in the kitchen. With trembling hands, I dialed 911, whispering urgently, "Please come to this house. I've been kidnapped." The operator acknowledged my distress, and while remaining silently on the line, I hid the phone under a towel in the corner of the room. As I rushed back to my previous spot, I heard the man's footsteps approaching from upstairs. He called my name, urging me to come down to the basement where he claimed Dennis was waiting. Fear and sickness consumed me, but I summoned the courage to ask if I could leave. The man's friendly facade vanished, replaced by a chilling realization that his plan had been foiled. He advanced towards me, grabbing my wrist with aggression, and began forcibly pulling me towards the basement. Tears streamed down my face as I cried out, but his threats silenced me momentarily. Reluctantly, I descended the stairs, the door slamming shut behind me, sealing my fate. The empty, unfinished basement greeted me with its cold concrete floor and a solitary support beam at its center. The room was bathed in a dismal yellow glow emitted by a single exposed light bulb hanging from the ceiling. It felt like the kind of place where kidnapped children would be held captive. Upstairs, the man's heavy footsteps reverberated, amplifying my terror. I had no idea what he was doing, but his movement was accompanied by the incessant ringing of the doorbell and the pounding of the police on the front door. Time seemed to stretch as the doorbell continued to ring, the police persistently attempting to gain entry. At last, a resounding crash echoed through the house as multiple sets of heavy footsteps approached. Overwhelmed by relief, I screamed for help at the top of the stairs, relentlessly banging on the door. The lock was undone, and a police officer on the other side swiftly seized hold of me, leading me to safety. Outside, several police cars stood parked, a testament to the urgency of the situation. I was taken aside by two officers, recounting the harrowing experience while we awaited my parents' arrival. The man who had imprisoned me was escorted outside, his hands bound in handcuffs, and placed inside a police car. That was the last time I laid eyes on him. When my parents arrived, my mother was overcome with emotion, her tears a reflection of the agony she had endured during those dreadful hours. The school had already been in a state of panic, with police called in, and Dennis's father realizing the gravity of the situation. As I grew older, I chose not to dig deeper into the details, as I preferred not to dwell on such a traumatic event. My mother and I attended counseling for months afterward. Needless to say, my parents were furious with Miss Blue for not verifying my connection to the person picking me up. Had I not thought to call the police, I shuddered to think of the tragic outcome that might have befallen me. It has been approximately 17 years since that incident, and I can only hope that the man responsible remains behind bars, far from any potential harm he might inflict. It was the spring of my junior year in high school, and excitement filled the air on the last day of school. Many students had chosen to skip class or leave early, taking advantage of the impending summer break. My group of friends and I decided to be part of the latter group, seeking adventure on this stormy, dark day. Originally, there were plans for a beach trip to celebrate the end of the school year, but the inclement weather had forced us to change our plans. Undeterred, we came up with an alternative idea. In our town, there was an abandoned elementary school that had been vacant for nearly a decade. Scheduled for demolition by year's end, we saw an opportunity to have some fun by exploring the deserted building on our last day of school. With no security cameras and the stormy weather keeping people indoors, we figured it was the perfect time to venture into the abandoned school. After lunch, our friend Eddie, who had his driver's license, drove us to the location. Nestled in the middle of a quiet neighborhood, the school remained hidden from main roads. We parked in a back lot that was shielded by overgrown bushes and trees, providing us with a discreet entry point. The school appeared untouched, its doors locked but not boarded up. Eddie retrieved a baseball bat from his trunk, ready to break one of the windows. Rain poured down as our nervous laughter mingled with the sound of the crashing glass. With the window shattered, we cautiously entered the building one by one. I couldn't help but feel a mix of nervousness and excitement, partly relieved that the pouring rain masked any noise we might make. The first room we entered was a 4th or 5th grade classroom. Desks and decorations still adorned the space, frozen in time. It was eerie to be inside a room that had once been filled with the laughter and learning of young children, now abandoned and collecting dust. The thunder and lightning outside added to the surreal atmosphere, casting intermittent flashes of light through the windows and doors. Equipped with the flashlights on our phones, we began exploring the hallways, moving from one classroom to another. The school felt frozen in time, untouched for years. Decay was evident throughout, a testament to its long abandonment. As we approached a corner, I glanced back down the hallway and noticed something protruding from one of the classroom doorways. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, I motioned for my friends to shine their lights towards it. Just as the light hit the doorway, the mysterious object quickly disappeared. Startled, we exchanged nervous glances and decided to sprint down the intersecting hallway, seeking refuge. After reaching what seemed to be the kindergarten wing, we heard another sound echoing through the building. It became clear that we were not alone. Locked doors and darkness enveloped the premises, intensifying our fear. Seeking safety, we rushed into the nearest classroom and shut the door behind us. It was a kindergarten classroom, adding to the eerie ambiance of the situation. We huddled in silence, flashlights off, listening to the relentless rain and the occasional thunderclap. Suddenly, the door to the classroom creaked open, as if pushed by an unseen force. Our hearts raced as we strained to see who or what was outside. The pitch-black hallway offered no clear view, but a chilling sensation gripped us as a head slowly emerged through the doorway. In a flash of lightning, we caught a glimpse of the person peering directly at us. Overwhelmed with fear, I apologized on behalf of all of us and announced our departure. The figure remained motionless, almost lifeless, as Eddie handed me the bat and struggled to unlock one of the windows. With a surge of adrenaline, we crawled out one by one, leaving the haunting scene behind. I glanced back one last time, the image of that eerie head etched into my memory. Finally outside, I sprinted to catch up with my friends, fearing that at any moment, the mysterious person might pursue us. We hastily drove away, the abandoned school fading into the distance. Later that year, the building was demolished, eventually replaced by a park. Surprisingly, we never faced any consequences for our unauthorized adventure. To this day, we remain uncertain whether the person at the doorway was a worker or just a random individual. Regardless, their behavior was undeniably creepy, leaving us with an unforgettable and spine-chilling experience. When I was a freshman in college, I enrolled in a challenging chemistry class that proved to be quite difficult for me. The classroom was arranged with tables grouped into fours, and I found myself sitting at a middle table towards the left side, all the way at the end. Next to me was a guy named Zach, who exuded an awkward aura that reminded me of a Reddit moderator. He stood around 5'8", slightly overweight, and sported a patchy, unattractive beard. Despite his unconventional appearance, Zach possessed a deep knowledge of chemistry and seemed to excel in his studies. As the semester progressed, Zach noticed my struggles in class and began offering his assistance. He went beyond helping me with homework and even allowed me to discreetly cheat off his tests. While there was never any hint of flirtation from Zach, I attributed that to his awkward nature rather than a lack of interest. Eventually, he requested my phone number so he could send me relevant study materials. Given his continuous help and the absence of any threatening vibes, I willingly shared my number with him. On the last day of class, Zach surprised me with an unexpected proposition. After the final lecture, he mustered the courage to ask me out on a date. Despite having no romantic attraction towards him and our stark personality differences, I felt indebted to him for helping me maintain an excellent grade throughout the semester. To let him down gently, I fabricated a story about going away to Miami for the next couple of weeks, hoping the significant gap in seeing each other would diminish his interest. However, Zach quickly responded, asking about our plans once I returned. Realizing my mistake, I reluctantly replied that I would be available upon my return. His response was cringeworthy, as he replied with a cheesy "cool" while nodding his head. From that moment until the end of class, the atmosphere turned incredibly awkward for me. As soon as class concluded, I hurriedly made my way to my car and drove straight home. Being a commuter, the last day of class marked the end of my interactions on campus. It was a Thursday, and my other friends from college suggested going out to celebrate the end of the semester. We decided to hit the town that night and enjoy ourselves. During our night out, I received a text from Zach inquiring about my Miami trip. In my inebriated state, I shared Zach's story with my friends, emphasizing how he helped me achieve an A, but now wanted a date. They jokingly suggested I go on the date just to be nice, and I sarcastically replied, "Yeah, for sure." I intended to respond to Zach's text later, but in my drunken haze, I completely forgot. The next day, I woke up to 2 follow-up texts from Zach, one filled with question marks and the other expressing disappointment in being ignored now that I no longer needed his help. Feeling a sense of unease, I replied, claiming that I was packing for my Miami trip that day. Zach promptly responded with a simple, "Okay." In reality, there was no trip to Miami, but I assumed Zach would never find out. However, later that night, while I was still out with my friends, I received a chilling text from Zach. He questioned why I had lied about going to Miami, leaving me dumbfounded and alarmed. I immediately showed the message to my friends, and we were all equally disturbed by its contents. I cautiously replied, asking him to clarify, but he dismissed it, stating it was nothing and expressing his dislike for liars. Genuine fear began to consume me as I suspected I might be stalked. I scanned the bar, searching for any sign of Zach's presence, but found no trace. Deciding not to respond further, I made up my mind to cut off all contact with him. However, the situation escalated when, late that night, as I arrived home and was in the process of taking off my shoes, I heard knocks at the door. It was around 1 a.m., and I nervously asked who it was. To my horror, Zach's voice came from the other side, identifying himself. My heart raced, and I yelled through the door, threatening to call my dad and have him deal with the situation. Miraculously, it seemed to deter Zach, as he didn't knock again. Shaken to the core, I immediately texted everyone I knew, sharing the terrifying encounter with my family and friends. Some suggested involving the police, and I agreed to go to the station the following day. However, before that could happen, I received an incredibly long, disturbing, and creepy text from Zach. It was appalling and left me feeling violated as I read his words. He expressed a range of emotions, hurt and anger being the prominent ones, after feeling used, lied to, and taken advantage of throughout the semester. He mentioned how he believed there was a strong chemistry between us from the beginning and was crushed by my elaborate lie about the Miami trip. He also made unsettling comments about noticing my occasional glances towards him during class. Zach concluded by requesting just one date, insisting that he had much more to offer than other losers on campus. In a twisted manner, he even proposed coming to my house for an in-person conversation. Without hesitation, I shared Zach's text with everyone, disregarding the late hour of 3 a.m. I immediately called my father, who, upon reading the message, took charge. He sent Zach a scathing text and attempted to call him repeatedly, but Zach, being the coward he was, refused to answer the calls. In addition, I visited the police station the next day, expressing my desire to press charges. The police attempted to contact Zach through calls and messages, but he evaded their attempts. Zach vanished completely, and I never heard from him again. Thanks to the police involvement and my father's intimidating responses, that basement-dwelling creep seemingly retreated into the shadows. Fortunately, I never encountered him on campus or had any further disturbing experiences. Nonetheless, I now know what it feels like to deal with an actual stalker.